Welcome to A Magical Life, Health, Wealth and Weight Loss. I'm your host, Magic Barclay, lead practitioner at Holistic Natural Health Australia and #1 best-selling author. In this podcast, I aim to give you practical tips on how to accelerate and sustain your health, increase your financial, spiritual and emotional wealth, and to look at something that haunts many of us needlessly, weight loss. In some episodes, I'll have guests available to give you even more tips, but in others, the floor is yours. Drop us a line at A Magical Life Podcast on Facebook and let me know what you would like to know more about. Now, sit back and enjoy, because it is time for you to create and truly discover a magical life. Welcome back to A Magical Life. I'm your host, Magic Barclay. And today, Julianne Bosch, author, coach, expat, and CEO mum, is joining us. Julianne is a mother to 3 children. She is the CEO to Mums as a life and career coach. She is the author of How a Mother Took Her First Step on the Moon, a mother's keepsake journal of advice to my children. As an expat wife of a busy executive, she made sure her family life was consistent, no matter what continent her family was living on. Back in the United States with an empty nest, Julianne decided to embark on a career and became a professional career and life coach. Julianne developed this keepsake journal to draw on her own experience to help her clients, new and current mothers, to document their own powerful advice. It is also her gift to her 3 adult children in honor of her 50th birthday. Whether readers are looking for a way to explain the birds and the bees or to enforce a consequence, she intended to offer her own successful mum moments that are perfect stories about the imperfection of motherhood. Living abroad, I would meet people with new careers and lifestyles that were different from my own. I'm a naturally curious person, and that is what I appreciated about moving around the globe, being exposed to a diverse map of the makeup of this world. Each human can teach you something or allow a lens to view a new perspective. We all have one wild and precious life, says Julianne. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Now, this is a very interesting tangent for this podcast because, we've spoken to career mums, stay-at-home mums, like all sorts of mums on the podcast, but no one's actually journalized those really learning aha moments. So that's really something new.
Yeah, I got to kind of that milestone and I said, how do I give back? How do I add value of what I've learned? Because as I mentioned, there are a lot of imperfections, a lot of uh-ohs, and I'm not telling you what to do in this book of my advice. I'm giving you suggestions, and take it, craft it, lens it to your own, and put it down on paper. Because journaling is such a powerful thing that nobody taught me when I was a young parent. So I wanted to kind of help and enforce that for parents to have a guidebook or a framework to work from when they're doing this job that is so important right now.
And it is a job, isn't it?
It is.
Well, I'm going to get more into what the book's about and some, mum hacks, I guess, later on in the episode. But I really want to ask my standard 3 questions because I'm amazed at the different answers I get. And I'm pretty sure you're going to give me some out of left field answers here.
I'm ready.
All right. Here's your first one. What can your expertise do to accelerate health, be it physical, emotional, or spiritual?
Well, for me, I feel like as a mom, we do everything for everyone else. And so documenting your game plan when chaos happens gives a mom a secret weapon. So I think it works with your mind, your body, and your spirit in that you can handle what is happening in your life. And that is my biggest gift back is journaling is a way of putting things on paper for the what ifs.
And there's a lot of what if moments as a parent.
Yeah, very, very much so. And I think those what ifs make us more of a fear factor. So when you can kind of erase the cobwebs a little bit and allow for a path of if this, then that instead, it makes you much more comfortable as a parent saying, okay, I've never experienced this before, but I've thought about, for example, what is integrity to you? If that is spiritually something that guides you as a parent of how, you want your kids to have more integrity, then you're able to kind of implement that plan a little bit easier when your integrity is shifted or it's not put into place the way you believe it should be. And I think I didn't learn that with wisdom comes reflection from what I did in my past. And I just hope that young parents can read the book and allow them a little compassion with that.
Great. Now, look, my next question is about wealth. And as mums, certainly when our kids are small, we're often out of the workforce for a while, even these days. And so our financial wealth can take a dip, but so can our emotional and personal wealth. We kind of lose who we are. We just become, little Johnny's mum rather than who we are. So what are your top 3 tips to creating wealth?
Well, I approach this wealth as kind of your own personal wealth, your value. And so I gave you 3 little nuggets that I stood firm with. One is that I wanted to follow the wealthy plan of setting up the 3 E's for my kids, which is helping them become educated, helping them become employed, and then eventually elsewhere. So even when my children were young, I was talking to them about what do you want to be when you grow up? And that leads to kind of my second wealth factor is kids these days right now are needing to think outside the box. We've never had pandemic. We've never had war. So giving your child the wealth of thinking outside of the box. How can we make this fun? How can we change it up so that it's not controlled by others? So mental wealth, I think, to pivot when needed. And then to be curious about life is my third piece of advice for wealth, because I now at my 50s, my children are teaching me things, and it made me reflect on there's a wealth in relearning and learning again and kind of expanding your brain more. And all of these things kind of set a mother up for their own personal 2 feet on the ground to cement themselves in who they are and saying, I'm not necessarily getting a paycheck or the bonus or the pat on the back like an employer may do, but you are contributing to possibly the next thinkers and learners and possibly Nobel Prize winners out in the world next. And if you put good humans into the world, that karma is going to keep coming back at you because they will impress you every single time. And mine keep doing that in their 20s now. And I'm just in awe of what they've made from kind of nothing, but yet giving them those parameters and those bases.
Great. And our final standard question is about weight loss. And, many mums, we kind of either do the secret eating in the cupboard or the late night eating or the picking off people's plates. And, even as they get older, it's kind of like we eat around our kids' schedules. So weight can become a big issue. Have you ever battled your weight? If so, how did you beat the battle? And what can you offer mums of, all stages of the cycle to really focus on their own weight and health?
Yeah, I think I've experienced both sides of it. It's been an ebb and flow of my own personal struggle of, are the pants too tight, or am I eating foods that aren't the best for me? Am I not feeding my children the best way that I could possibly have? So I think as a mother, knowing that ebb and flow is a natural part of the job. And I think the battle so much is getting in our own heads and pushing at ourselves and saying we've failed. And something as a mom that in relation to food is that I started my day with what are the good things that I want to happen? What are the bad things that possibly happened yesterday? And how am I going to make it better today? And I offer that as a parent in relation to food is kind of just weighing incremental change, because I do think small changes as a parent will help the weight battle. Is it, 5 minutes with the child in the stroller that you walked around the block instead of heading to the refrigerator when you had that trigger? So those are all personal things that I myself kind of said, okay, I need to get up off the couch and take my child to go and see the sunset, or enjoy a little bit more of what is out there in the world and not necessarily get fixated on the number. And I will say the opposite side of it. I've been experiencing eating disorders on the other end of influences of children that have been in my community, and having compassion for you are never in another woman's shoes and what she is going through. And so whether it is eating too much or eating too little, I think we all have to kind of stop the judgment a little and just say, what are the incremental things that we can do better tomorrow? Maybe if we're not feeling so positive at this moment today.
Now let's get into your book and what you can do for mums. So for me, my kids are now grown men living in my own home and probably never leaving the nest because of circumstances. But certainly along the way, I felt like, I'm sure we all say this, why isn't there a manual? Like, why isn't there some great advice? And so many mums and dads, we're not leaving the guys out, but, so many parents are now isolated. There's not that tribe. There's not that community, not that village raising the children. So how can your book kind of help create that support, that backbone of advice that we're often lacking? And tell us all about it.
Well, I will say to you that something sparked this book to be written is I was faced with my own cousin diagnosed with anaplastic thyroid cancer. And it made me realize that a little bit what you're saying here is because of isolation and, we haven't taking care of the health in certain ways, it made me ponder, if I was no longer here, what would I want? And something that we haven't continued is the storytelling aspect. I think you remember these stories of your great grandmother telling your grandmother, telling your mother, and now your mother telling you. And it forced me to just go back to the basics. Gosh, I hope my adult children know all of the things that I wrote in that book. But one is forcing kind of the discussion around the basics and telling a story about a mother's experience with something. And for example, I will say one of the stories I wrote about was don't always assume you know all the facts. And I tell a silly story about how my daughter and I had a little miscommunication. I signed up for too much as a mother and was late to an appointment to the OBGYN. And I rushed up into her bathroom, grabbed a washcloth, cleaned up, and rushed to the gynecologist. I arrived and the gynecologist said, wow, there's a party. There's a fiesta going on down here. And I'm thinking in my mind, wow, new doctor in a new country, and he's creeping me out. And I said, who recommended this person to me, this doctor? And I'm thinking one thing, the doctor's thinking another thing. And I walk away. And later that evening, my daughter comes running into the kitchen and she's bawling and saying, this special glitter that I have been saving to use for after school, I put in my special washcloth in my bathroom on the counter, and it's missing. And it made me ponder the perspective that a doctor is coming at me with one thought process, like, oh my goodness, this lady has glitter, rainbow glitter everywhere. And my perspective of, he's not being professional yet, he's professional. And so I write that piece of advice as I do some of the other basics. We know this. It's not something new, but it's a story to tell you that I made a mistake. And then I tell you that advice. And then I ask you a powerful question to journal. If you were to experience something like that, what would you do? And what I found with my current clients right now is when given powerful questions to journal and think about, and now in this case, as a parent, this book gives you a framework to kind of write down your game plan. And 9 times out of 10, when we know the basics, we write down our game plan. When things happen, it's like, oh yeah, I've thought about this. Boom, this is what I do. And I move forward. So when in isolation, when it's coming over Zoom and it's coming over tech and media and areas that we can't control, we aren't thinking about our history. And I think history is something that we need to kind of lean back into a little bit more and listen to that story of what our grandmothers did, and not so much do it, because life has changed. How we're raising our kids today has changed. And as they grow into adults, they're facing new things that we did not experience. For example, the war in Ukraine or pandemic. However, it is something of the basics that we can craft and mold, and we can use these things going forward to say, this is what I know, add to it, mold it, shape it to be your own, and go forth knowing that you've got people that have your back on that. And I hope the book spurs you to write down your memories and to create that time capsule for your family.
Couldn't stop giggling when you were talking about the glitter.
Well, I did want to expose to you that there were many moments like that of just some silly things that happen as a parent. So it was funny later when I was writing it, but at the time I was mortified.
Mine probably wasn't as pretty as glitter, but I remember taking my second son out to lunch. Actually, both of them were with me, but the second one was a projectile vomiter. And, it was kind of funny when it went across the room, but when it went across me, not so funny. And we were out at a really nice place meeting some people. And so I went to the bathroom and actually turned my top inside out because there was nothing else I could do. And, people were like looking at me strangely going, that's an interesting way of wearing your clothes. Like, it's just something that you do. And no one at the table addressed the fact that my top was inside out. It was almost like, we don't even want to know because that's probably going to be disgusting, because they all knew this kid was a projectile vomiter.
Yeah.
And it just brings me back to that moment of, everyone just kind of accepts that sometimes crazy stuff happens.
Yeah. And not assuming that, she's lost a marble tonight. She's decided to wear all of her clothes inside out. It's taking that time. I'm laughing because I had a similar situation with my son, who was also a projectile vomiter when he was fed too much food, and we got into some windy roads, and he threw up all over me, and we were supposed to go to a reunion. Well, I was not so lucky. It was so bad that I couldn't even turn it inside out. And I happened to, my husband was a scuba diver, and he had a wetsuit in the back of the trunk. And I decided, well, I'd rather walk into this event in the wetsuit bottom than I would with the vomit that was all over me, that had such a smell that was so intense. And like you, people kind of just looked at me funny, and I said, well, that's what happens when you're with kids. You got to go with it. And I ended up in a wetsuit. So I hope women can laugh at these stories. That's what I also wanted, is to kind of think about the perfections of being imperfect as a mom.
And there are a lot of imperfect moments. So, let's really explore your journey. An expat, so you're traveling around, kids in tow. I'm sure there were a lot of really imperfect moments going on there. How did you keep your sanity, and how did you kind of roll with the flow, basically?
Well, because of my husband's job, we moved 13 times on 4 continents. And I will tell you, there were moments of, it was tough. It was not easy. And I think there was a lot of self-talk. And this is up to me. I can either make this the best moment of my life in a new country, and I'm given an opportunity to learn new things and be curious, or this can be the worst experience of my life. And I had to remind myself of that motto a lot because I was the crafter of my destiny. I was being given an opportunity to see something that others had not. And so I felt it was my duty to be able to expose myself to the best and wonderful things of a country and bring back knowledge to those people, because I think we have a perception of what a certain culture is like. And especially here in the United States, I came back and they would make a flippant remark about something. And I'd say, actually, that's not true. If you look at the history or you go and visit this and see this museum in that country, you'll find that it's X. And I was able to turn it to a superpower because it was knowledge collection, actually seeing something. And even my kids used it as a way to help without being snotty, but help others understand maybe something that wasn't familiar to them, or expose them to something like a food that you may find pleasure in because it aligns with a similar kind of, let's say, beans are popular in one country. Well, they cook beans another way in another country. So bringing those two things together as a connector was kind of what I found to my superpower when I was feeling down about it. It's my duty to kind of grab knowledge. And, back in my day, we had National Geographic, and we were always kind of going through those and learning and seeing the pictures of other cultures. Well, I got to do that. I was my own National Geographic. And even now, when I return to the United States after moving so many times, I've decided to take a day and go explore the things that are around me that I didn't realize are here. For example, I returned to Sarasota, Florida. I had no clue what was in my backyard. Well, yet the Ringling Circus was here, and I have the mansion. And yesterday I went to go see his house and walk around, and who knew all the things about the circus? And it was fascinating.
So as parents, we've kind of discussed the funny side of it when we just have to improvise and see the humor. But there's also the isolating side of being a parent. No matter where you are, whether you've got a baby, a toddler, a young child, a preteen, a teen, or someone in their 20s and beyond, it can be isolating. Especially these days, you can find that you're staring at the same four walls and you love these kids, but they're driving you nuts. So how can you suggest that mums and dads, we're not leaving them out, as I said, how can you suggest that they focus on their own path and, reflect on their own sanity?
I would say the biggest piece of this is, what is important to you right now? What is the end goal of this? Is you've brought this child into the world, and it's a big job and it's overwhelming at times. So lean into some things that help you manage it. Mine was an escape. I read so many free books from the library and Apple Books. Or is it listening to some podcasts so you don't feel alone in your learning? Or is it music that charges your battery? Or is it a type of exercise that you need to put in, and schedule that? And don't feel guilty about that, because it is a long-term journey. I mean, I think little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. You're constantly going to be called on for action to assist. And it is a tiring, laborious job as a parent. But I think your most important piece is, how do you manage it? What is important to you right now to help that child succeed? Because if you don't take that self-care for yourself first, you can't be a better parent. And I think our culture right now does not allow for that pause or that time to meditate or listen to a podcast or self-manage yourself. And I highly recommend to a parent, work on that, cultivate that, because it is really important to keep you going when things get tough. Mine was reading. And I will say I ate the GDP and really fine chocolate. I splurged on little different kinds of dark chocolate. And for me, that was kind of my bliss that I had as my go-to when I was just feeling a little off is, okay, I need an hour to just disconnect and read or listen to a podcast or listen to certain music and recenter, self-manage myself.
Great. Is there something that we haven't covered, Julianne, that you think the listeners really need to know?
As parents, I think we have an ideal of you want best for your children. And I remind you that they will constantly shock you. Whenever you say black, they will go white. It's just the law of attraction and the way it happens. And I guess as we look at all the conversation that we've had between weight and your mental and physical and spiritual wealth, and all of those things tie together as a parent, providing stepping stones or blocks for your child or children. I created this thing that I want to share with your listeners. It's called the safety zone. And I really encourage, it's something that I fell upon it on accident because another mother told me about it. And I'm spreading the word of this is have a safety zone at home. So your children do have that confidence to have conversations. Communication and storytelling is really important. So have them be able to express themselves in the home, have personal conversations about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, because they need somewhere now in this day and age, dependable, that they can come to the people that they trust the most to have conversations and even uncomfortable conversations. And you can read more about that in my book, is creating this safety zone for your kids. But that's something I just really want to touch on because of how our world is right now. And I lean into that and I offer that piece of advice to your parents that are listening.
Yeah, safety zone certainly is important. And that kind of gets me to, a private zone as a mum. I'm finding this. Mine are 20 and 23. And I've never closed a door to them, but now it's ridiculous. I can't even be in the bathroom by myself. So, how do we find that space, especially, throughout all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world at the moment, and sometimes we're locked in the same home. How do we find a space to escape that's not the walk-in wardrobe or, the laundry?
Something I learned, and I think it's creating those parameters, designing the alliance with your family members, sit down and talk to them like, I need this hour to recharge and be efficient, my maximum efficiency for you. That's going to be in my bedroom with the door closed. And I need that hour of this day to be silent, and if you don't design that alliance, and then on the counter side of that is, what do they need? When do you need your alliance with this relationship that we're creating in our home? I have found that has been the most beneficial. I call it a design alliance because it's in your home. They're kind of making their requests. You're making your requests. And as you grow older together, you can recraft that design alliance. You can change it. But if you don't communicate the needs that you need, your kids can't read your mind. So I think it's really important for you as they also become adults is to be vocal with your needs and be curious enough to listen to what are your needs right now? How can I honor your safety zone and space right now so that we don't mesh and clank heads? Again, creating that framework for intention of how parenting is going to be. This is what's going to happen in our house.
I did try that. But as 20 and 23, they know everything in the world. And I know nothing, apparently. I got to 50 by some miracle. And, so I think that kind of leads me to my next question. And that is, what happens when they're grown up and they have this fresh perspective on life and seem to think that it was a fluke, we made it? Like, they didn't live through the 80s. They have no idea, and the 70s, they have no idea that we rode in cars without seatbelts, often on the floor or the back seat or in the back of the ute or truck with nothing holding us in. They don't understand that there were no telephones and the time you went home was when the street lights came on, but no one knew where you were all day. How do we explain to this generation that we've survived so much that we can kind of make it now into our later adulthood without their guidance?
Yeah, I think this has been something that's reoccurring happening to me. My three kids are now elsewhere and they are working, yet I'd have these moments. For example, here in the United States, a movement was happening and one of my children turned off their phones and I could not reach him. And then the next thing I know, there's news media saying that there's a riot, that people have been shot, and so panic sets in. And so I encourage you to watch the news and sit down and have those discussions. Say, in my day, this is what we were exposed to. We didn't have X, Y, and Z. This is how we did these things. If you were in my shoes, what would you tell me now at my 50s? And listen to their response and provoke conversation about what your time was like and what they would do in your shoes. And then I would say, okay, so now with advanced technology, the way you guys do things on that, I would do X, Y, and Z and have them tell you what is reality. Because I think even as parents, we have a perception of what their lives are like right now. And I found a middle ground with those conversations lately. I've had to read more. I've had to swallow a little bit of a jagged pill because I have been taught things, but also my children have also evoked conversation with me that I don't know if they would have unless I was open to receiving it. So I would say, explain to them what the 80s was like for you, give them a little bit of the history behind it. And then I would say, ask some powerful questions to them, like, what would you have done in my situation back then in the 80s? And listen to what they're saying and just say, well, this isn't a possibility because we didn't have a phone or we didn't, we didn't do that. What would you have done in that time period? And it's interesting to kind of listen to their answers. And it has been thought provoking. And I guess that's where I lean on you to mix it up and have them revert back to your shoes and what you have learned and say, this is what I know. And if you knew these things and you were 50, what piece of advice would you give me? Because I so far have been surprised. And I keep reminding them that life somehow morphs and repeats itself. I mean, things that were happening in the 70s, I see are happening again. Things that were happening in the 80s are happening again in another way, but a little bit of the same topic. So that would be my go-to at it as these conversations arise, because I feel like they're not new. The issues that are happening are not new. They just have a different slant to it, and we can find a middle ground.
Fantastic advice, as always. Now, Julianne, we love freebies here. And off air, you mentioned a very generous freebie. So lay it on us. What is it?
I would love for the first, I'm going to say the first 3 listeners that reach out to you and pop their piece of advice to you, I will send you a free book, signed copy and a note written specifically for you, for your listeners.
Great. So listeners, on our Facebook page, when this episode goes to air, you will see a post, and it's going to be, what is your best parenting advice? We'll pass it on to Julianne. We'll pass your details on. And if you're the first 3, you will get a book. So that's pretty cool.
Fantastic. I can't wait to meet you 3 and hear your advice.
I can't wait to hear your advice. So our Facebook page is at A Magical Life Podcast. So definitely jump on. If you just heard this episode, quickly jump on to our Facebook page and leave your parenting advice. Now, the book is called How a Mother Took Her First Step on the Moon, a Mother's Keepsake Journal of Advice to My Children. What a fantastic book. And where was it 20 years ago for me?
Or me. That's why I created it. I think we were both needing that middle ground. We needed somebody to kind of give us our first step. And that's why I wrote it. I assumed that for us, Neil Armstrong was such a historical character of taking that first step and that fear of the first. And I wanted to provide those first step moms an opportunity to have that framework. So I look forward to hearing their comments, and reach out to me on my webpage or or on social media. I would love to have a conversation with other parents.
Great. And your webpage is www.mothersfirststep.com. Where on socials can people find you?
I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, and LinkedIn under my name, Julianne Bosch, Bosch, and Mother's First Step on Instagram.
Fantastic. Listeners, this was your episode 225. Of course, don't forget to jump onto our Facebook page at A Magical Life Podcast, pop in your parenting advice, and if you're the first 3, Julianne will be sending you a book. And as always, listeners, thank you for your time. Julianne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. And listeners, go forth and create your magical life. Thanks for listening today. Please subscribe to hear future episodes, leave a review, and share this podcast. You can follow us on Facebook at A Magical Life Podcast or at Holistic Natural Health Australia. That's holistic with a W. You can find us on Instagram at Holistic Natural Health or at www.holisticnaturalhealth.com.au. That's where you'll access all sorts of articles, freebies, and more.